We have a awesome special guest with Corey and myself today. We have none other than AWS trainer extraordinaire, Mr. Bart Castle. Bart,
There
thank
he
you for being
is.
on the show. There he is.
Here. Hey,
Welcome,
friends.
welcome. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Just it's a foggy morning here in Asheville, North Carolina, having a good time. Yep. Excited to
Yes,
talk about cloud. It feels cloudy out
it
here.
does feel cloudy. I was actually out dropping off my kids at school this morning, and it was rather humid here in South Carolina. So in case you out there in the audience don't wonder, you literally got the Carolina trifecta sitting
There you
on in
go.
this call here right now. I'm gonna cough while I'm laughing here.
All over the Carolinas here this morning.
All over
Yep.
the Carolinas, Derek is gonna be coughing away and things. But we are here to continue our series on cloud learning because that is obviously incredibly important. And Bart, being an AWS trainer that you've been over the multitude of years that I've known you, and even prior to that, where do you feel are the most essential skills for someone to enter a cloud role?
Sure. Yeah, classic question. Yep, we get to hear that all the time. Well, for me, the biggest thing that I try to get people thinking about when it's career training time, time to invest in themselves, skill up, is to keep in mind that when we talk about cloud jobs, the majority of cloud jobs are more like cloud adjacent positions where you are going to be supporting cloud infrastructure as well as on premise hybrid infrastructure in parts of the existing organization. So I think that it's really important to imagine what that sort of cross training role would look like for you. Getting into cloud computing is a little bit like learning to use a tool, but then you still need to figure out where you're going to apply that within the industry, within the tech space, and keeping in mind too that different organizations will use wildly different tech stacks. So I think in general, getting into cloud computing should be augmented with an approach of saying, am I going to get into architecting? Do I want to do development support? Do I want to do something more in the analytics world, machine learning, AI? Ultimately, those sorts of skill sets are going to get closer to solving a business problem, which will make you valuable to an organization. And then having your cloud certifications and cloud training, whether it be with a single vendor or across vendors or across multiple certs in the same vendor, will help make you appealing as an employee, as a hiring prospect, but then also valuable to your team as a center of excellence and a knowledge base that can help grow the rest of the team too. So yeah, in the end, I think that people should consider traditional technical roles and make cloud computing part of the portfolio that they're adding to it. So that's usually where I try to get people thinking about like what is interesting about tech to you. And let's start from that. Because I guarantee you cloud computing will get you there. You will find uses for cloud-based services in almost every avenue of IT. So I think it's a bigger question to go back to. What do you like about information tech? Where would you like to go? Linux operating systems, Windows. If you want to get into software development, picking up any sort of utility frameworks like JavaScript or Python are going to be super valuable in just about every tech space.
Yeah.
So focus on the cloud vendor, but also make sure that you're skilling up on the side parts of it, the pieces that are going to help you solve business problems. Databases are another great place to be. DevOps, security. Yep.
Yep. Can't win Best Actor without a Best Supporting Actor or Actress.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah, it's true. And, along those lines too, when you get into the career hunt, you also are thinking about location and the types of organizations that you might work for. Can I get hired locally? Am I going to work remotely? Mm-hmm. And once you have that industry or that potential employer in mind, I would build my skill set around what those jobs are requiring. That way I'm directly applying my efforts towards some specific goal rather than maybe just kind of like nebulously skilling up on things that aren't directly impactful to a job that you're pursuing right now.
Yeah. That's usually as a help desk person, I shouldn't be running off and learning about IoT devices.
I don't know. That's probably a great thing to do on the side.
That probably is.
Yeah. Well, and I think that a lot of employers are interested in tech passionate people anyway. So if it really is something that you're into and you would even invest your own personal time and money into learning those things, that's even more valuable then because you have this interest in learning that's more holistic than just getting the job then. So I think that you're going to more authentically come at what you're doing. You're going to bring an excitement to it, and you probably will ultimately, make a good impact with those tools. The last thing I would encourage people to do is think about how you could showcase that side project or hobby. So if you really are into IoT automation while you're doing your help desk gig, capture it, document it, blog about it, put it on YouTube, write articles on other platforms about what you're doing. Even if you don't think that it is valuable to others, it is. And having that experience out there will show you as a player who can not only do these technical things, but also can talk about them and build community around it, which again, I think are important factors in how you will participate in a team. And it helps you showcase your skills, not just from a technical perspective, but also a soft skills sort of perspective. And that makes you a valuable team member.
Soft skills are huge now. That's the one that people don't realize: your personal brand, your soft skills, your presentation skills, things like that. Before we get into kind of all the AWS learning pathways, I mean, I've been kind of pushing personally the whole back to basics thing. People don't realize how key basics are: knowing what databases are, knowing networking, knowing subnetting, knowing basic security concepts. Um, what do you feel about? I mean, what are your feelings on Henry? What do you become? You need to be an expert in the basic concepts to really excel in your career, I believe.
Yeah, one thing that I think there are some really tried and true arenas in the tech space, like working in a Windows domain is something that will probably always exist. And so if you have a chance to work and at whatever sysadmin level that you could get into in a Windows environment, understanding how some of the integrated authentication systems work there, understanding Active Directory, group permissions, I think that those skill sets for me, I picked that stuff up way early in my career, but the patterns of role and group-based permissions, all of those have played true for years and years and years since I learned them. The idea of like group policy, resulting set of permissions, all of those kind of hierarchical permissions models that you get into, I think that is super valuable and relatable across all of the other authentication realms that are out there. So when you start thinking about single sign-on or federated identities, you will have some familiarity with where companies are coming from with their existing security and directory infrastructure. So I think those sorts of skills are going to be super valuable. General systems administration with Linux, being able to manage file system permissions, understand how process locking works, basic like input output data operations, like you said, databases, file access. Once you start doing these studies, you will see there's a ton of similarity between the read and write throughput collisions or delays that might happen. The same idea that you might have a busy interface somewhere on a network. You get into queuing and quality of service. I think all of those patterns really have helped me a lot as an architect. So when I sit down with a new customer or a business partner or a student, we're talking about a generic set of skills and problems that technology's been struggling with for years. It's not this new thing that we're discussing. It's just in the context of a cloud vendor at this point. But ultimately, those are the tech tools. So authorization and authentication would be a key set to understand those principles, how it works across different platforms. The other one there is looking at your basic data in network patterns. Yeah, now I don't know if you need to learn subnetting. I like it personally a lot myself. There's lots of great tools that will help you with it. But you should understand the implications of TCP/IP networks. It is certainly a valuable skill set. And I'm not talking high level. I'm thinking more like network plus CCNA level stuff where that's a great place to start. That's helped me a ton throughout my career. Yeah.
Thanks.
No,
absolutely.
But since we are here and you are our AWS guru, so to speak, thinking about the different learning paths that are available at AWS, right? There's a vast number of them. All right. I've seen multiple people post on social media, hey, I've earned my like 20th AWS certification. And it's just
11, isn't it?
Is it 11? I don't know. It feels like 20. There's a lot. And so I sit there and wrap my mind around like, which path do you feel is most appropriate for someone to go down? Like I know there are different ones for kind of different interests, but if I'm that sysadmin, I'm that kind of, I don't want to say entry level, but kind of mid-level person. I'm really generalist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do I go from there? What path would you recommend I go down?
Sure. Well, network administration and systems operations, kind of what my background was in originally. So that's pretty much the story that I had when I came to the cloud computing world, which has been probably like 9 years ago now that I started teaching doing this. And at the time, there was really only like the solutions architect course. So it really was just this one, and we didn't
Behemoth
have that many
test.
courses yet. And it grew out of that. Now, the big thing to kind of keep in mind here is that you're going to have certification-based topics that you'll be studying for. So again, I would say if there's a position you have in mind and a cert is specifically listed as in demand for it, then that's a great place to start. If not, the solutions architect really is kind of the liberal arts generalist approach. You are going to learn about messaging systems. You're going to learn about APIs. You're going to learn about queuing mechanisms, web scale architectures, really just kind of the biggest parts of how to take existing infrastructure and make it cloud forward, innovation friendly. You're going to hear patterns introduce that prevent innovation, that cause maintenance problems, and you're going to help identify what those look like. So I think the solutions architect is a great place to start for that, understanding what businesses commonly struggle with. So for me, the solutions architect made a lot of sense right away. I saw many patterns that I had seen myself already, but new terminology, new services that kind of get wrapped around it. So I think it provides a good context for all of the other learning. Now, that being said, I don't think the solutions architect is as much of a doing cert as it is. It's a lot of theory. I mean, there's a lot of best practices and design principles that we throw at you. Whereas if you look at the systems operations, the SysOps certification and that learning path, that is a more real world operational training set. And that exam even has a lab on it. So I think that in general, that one is really a more of a doing sort of skill set that you're going to get from it. You will learn.
I think like somebody who's more like a cloud engineer, right? If I'm more of an engineer who's going to be constantly hands-on keyboard, sysops.
Exactly.
I may have to reach out to Bart here, because it's funny. I'm actually beginning my AWS journey now. I've been Azure for a decade, almost,
a long time.
And I'm going down the path now of like, okay, I mean, I've done the associate. I'm not the associate. I've done the admin, the architect for Azure. And you look at, so like my question for you was, what do you think is the most challenging? For me, on the Azure side, it was always the generalist ones, like the architect, because it covers so much. I like a lot of the specialty exams, because if I'm taking a specialty exam, I'm already laser focused on, say, virtual desktops or advanced networking or security.
Sure.
So to me, it's a little easier to focus on that stuff. But when I have to focus on things, like you said, sysops or high level architecture generalization, where you have to know a lot about a lot of things as opposed to a lot about one thing, which one do you think is the most challenging?
Yeah, I mean, I do, as much as I like to recommend the architect as a starting point, I do think it is the most challenging one, that if you don't have some industry experience, there will be many concepts that are very foreign to you. And until you get a chance to start building them and using them directly yourself, they can be really tough concepts to nail down. Like auto scaling, some of those concepts are really nebulous. And if you've never worked with virtual machines before, or if you've never worked with containers before, there's a whole lot of underlying tech that you don't know. So you're going to have to learn that part of it too. And I think the biggest thing is just being realistic about what you can learn and do at any particular time. Sorry, my thing was going off over here.
Is that the dinosaur, or what's going on over there?
Yeah, I think there's one of the dinosaurs is upset. They're getting all riled up.
Oh, he was just talking about him. He was snubbed from the latest Jurassic Park movie. That's it, right?
Which one? Who?
I said your dinosaur was snubbed from being in Jurassic World, wasn't he?
Could have been a contender. They could have been a part of it. When you get into the pro topics, though, that's when it gets really the Solutions Architect Pro is the hardest test I've taken in the whole AWS catalog. It is multiple different learning tracks that you have in each question. So it may be one question, one topic on the associate. They will put 4 of those into a single question on the pro cert. So there's a huge amount of information to process. It's the only exam I have trouble finishing, like on time. There's literally that much to read in every question, and then each answer will have 5 to 6 sentences for each of the options. So it is a huge amount of text just to process. If you don't know what those patterns are that they're asking about, it's really hard. And that's the point, is that you're supposed to be able to really have that expertise at that point. So in a lot of ways, I think it is a good vetting for it, but it's hard. The DevOps Pro, I don't have anywhere near as much difficulty getting through that one as the Solutions Architect Pro.
And it's funny, for a lot of these tests, you're almost, I'm sorry, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Oh, you're good. Oh, the last thing I was going to mention is that if you're really serious about getting into any of these vendors, though, I do think that it's great to cross train on them all. I would heavily encourage people to do the solutions architect, the sysops, and the developer. They just support each other so well. In my mind, as a trainer, it's all just associate level knowledge that you need to have, and you get it by studying the 3 courses together. So I really think that that's valuable. Plus, the developer course gets you into heavily into infrastructure as code, the software developer kits, and a lot of the serverless models that are really important now too. And all of that stuff supports the solutions architect too. It supports the sysops. So yeah, really consider investing in all 3 if you can. Study them together. I know that's a lot, but it does help. They support each other very well.
Yeah, I actually recommend a lot of people when they're taking these tests. I recommend like learning how to take tests too is just as important as learning the information because, like you said, the difference from the associate to the pro level ramps up in the difficulty of the questions because, like you said, one part becomes a 4-part question. So you have to really learn, and it comes with experience, is what it does.
Sure.
Well, and you also talked about it being.
You're good.
You talked about it being more like also like a time management thing, like kind of dovetailing on that. Like if you're not familiar with how to take those tests and being able to be very diligent about how you go about it, you can easily run out of time, and then you're done.
Yeah, that's for me. It's always do everything that I know right off the top, and flag the stuff that I'm going to need to come back and look at later. That way I can like time divide the stuff I know I'm going to be struggling with. So I'm like, okay, I got these 10 questions. I got an hour left. That's my plate ahead of me for the last part of the exam.
There you go. Bart, you talked about the 3 different ones that you would cross learn together, and I think from a skills perspective, that makes the most sense in terms of that cross training.
Sure.
Ultimately, beyond that, what is the best advice that you can give someone who is sitting for an AWS certification, irrespective of whether it's developer, sysops, cloud architect, machine learning specialty, networking specialty, whatever? Like, what's kind of the core? Hey, if you don't have this, like, doesn't matter what test you go down, you're gonna have some issues.
Well, at AWS, the big like unifying service is identity and access management. So I don't think that you could ever spend too much time learning about users and identities, permissions policies, the many different ways that we're able to use IAM throughout AWS. And also some of the mechanisms like assuming a role, which is an AWS unique sort of aspect. Role-based administration, the way that we do it at AWS, it's pretty unique. And it's not as intuitive as you might think first starting out. So I think that doubling down on anything with identity and access management will go super far on every single exam. It's the topic that I talk about in every single training class. We cover IAM to some degree. And it's the thing that I will generally quiz learners on more, just kind of auxiliary on the side, just to really drive it home. You need to know these policies. You need to know the permissions. And the craziest thing about IAM is that when I look over my years as an administrator, there were countless times where I had dozens of different authentication schemes happening in my data center, and they were not all integrated together. But when I'm using something like AWS, the identity and access management layer, it is ubiquitous across all of the services. So that is really powerful. The fact that you can standardize that sort of authentication and authorization across that many services. Yeah, so it's a big deal, and it will help you very far. The second thing that I encourage people to do is look at the provided resources that we give you. There is an exam guide that will tell you what the domains look like, the subjects and services that you'll see in scope on the exam. And then basically make yourself a punch list. Like, these are the things I know that I can tell you right now what that service does, what problem it solves, and why it's different from other products like it. If you can do that, you're probably ready for most of the exams. And then narrow down your studies until you're down to a list of things that are smaller and focus on that, apply leverage there, repeat that process, make a shorter list. And again, the goal is primarily on all these exams is to know what the service does, the problem it solves, and why it's different from other solutions that are similar to it. If you can do that, you're like 70, 80% of the way there for that service on all of the exams. So really that's the trickiest part. And the FAQs are a great place to do that. So if you run into something like Amazon Athena, you see it on a list that's like, I should know enough about this. rather than doing all of the documentation and everything, if you're in a crash course mode, go and read the frequently asked questions. I guarantee you'll get the right language about how we're going to talk about it. You'll hear common questions about how it's similar to other vendors, and definitely get the value proposition of what problem, like what business problem that solves for us. So that's one of my biggest tips, is to use the FAQs. They're great. They're the right level of language.
I like to start with a big old spreadsheet and just start putting down the domain requirements, what we have to do. And then you start, like I said, narrowing it down further and further and further until you say, you know what? Okay, I've got this. Go take the exam. And the big thing for me is, I think, just set a date. When do you want to be done by, and schedule the exam early. So that way you have kind of that self-imposed deadline you want to meet.
I agree. I usually tell students, like, if it's me and I'm really going to go do this, I would do this 2 to 3 weeks from taking this class. Like, I would give yourself a timeline like that and spend 2 weeks crashing through stuff, and then 1 week doing your final prep, and then go and take the exam. We have really doubled down on the self-paced learning options that AWS has right now. So if you check out Skill Builder, that is our new self-paced video and digital content. Great training resources there. We moved all of our sample question banks over into Skill Builder there as well, and they're being regularly updated. So there's lots of great assessment tools that are there to help you figure out how far you are from your objective. And then there are some nice exam prep courses that are in there too, that are led by our solutions architects and trainers. So a lot of good stuff, and it's coming directly from AWS. Most of it's freely available. So take advantage of those resources. Many of them are linked on the website, on the certification page. If you look at the bottom, there will be exam prep resources. Use the sample questions, and then use the question bank too. And that'll help you get ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Glad to see that being built out, and glad that it's growing well. I think that's been kind of one of the biggest asks across a lot of learners, is having a lot of that content readily available directly from the vendor. So that's awesome to hear.
Yep. And I can say firsthand that the AWS stuff is really top notch. I've been using it a lot lately. So that's because of you, man. Kudos.
It's part of why I, decided to come and join AWS, was that I really wanted to see the AWS model applied to training and certification. I mean, what they do with feedback to improve services, in my mind, I've worked with many, many training providers, and they all kind of had similar problems, like similar issues with scheduling and with course content, creation, licensing material, all of these different kind of they're kind of table stakes for the training world. And seeing AWS apply their feedback and efficiency model to it is really exciting. And the organization is growing and changing really quickly. So that's exciting for me, having been a trainer for almost 10 years now. See them really putting the pedal down and really pumping money and focus and talent into creating great training material. And so that's part of why I came onto the team. So it's very exciting.
Nice.
Time.
Nice. All right, Bart. Well, that does it for us. Thank you so much for being a guest on our show. We really appreciate having you, and I can safely say we will have you back again at some point, talk more about AWS. I believe that obviously it's not going anywhere, so people will want to know just that much more, and maybe we'll dive into some more specialty topics like machine
Dinosaurs.
learning. Or dinosaurs, yes.
Well, dinosaurs.
My son loves dinosaurs, so honestly, I could probably bring him on here, and if you just show him.
There he is.
Yeah, there he is. He'll just dive into it. All right, folks. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for Bart for joining us. We have yet another episode coming up on more cloud skilling, so make sure you stay tuned. And as always, folks, remember, the cloud is calling. Thank you.